Welcome back, dear students. Currently, we are learning about the second chapter, banking institutions. In this session, which is session 4, we are going to continue with the types of scheduled and non-scheduled banks in detail. So, we've already seen the organization structure of a banking industry. Now, we are going to learn in detail about the scheduled and non-scheduled banks. When we speak about these banks, the scheduled or non scheduled banks, we need to understand the main purpose or the reason why these industries or these banks were introduced. Coming to the meaning of scheduled bank. A scheduled bank is a banking company with a paid up capital of rupees 5 lakhs or more. Scheduled banks are those which are regulated by Reserve Bank's second schedule. Or I can say that these are the ones which are included as per the second schedule of the Reserve Bank of India Act of 1934. Then the meaning of non-scheduled banks. Non-scheduled banks are those banks which are not bound by the Reserve Bank's second schedule. The Reserve Bank requires scheduled banks to present or send periodic returns. Then the next concept, definition of a scheduled bank. So as we've already learnt about the meaning, which basically means including as per the second schedule of the RBI Act, we'll see the further requirements to regard a bank as a scheduled bank. As the name suggests, the scheduled banks are those which are accounted or which are included in the second schedule of the Reserve Bank of India Act of 1934. In order to qualify as a scheduled bank, the bank should confront the following conditions. The first one is the total minimum value of paid up capital and reserve must amount to rupees 5 lakhs. The bank requires to satisfy the central bank that its affairs are not carried out in a way that causes harm to the interest of the depositors. The bank needs to be a corporation rather than a sole proprietorship or partnership firms. The bank needs to be a partnership or a sole trading concern. Apart from this, a scheduled bank enjoys the rights such as right to receive refinance facility from the Apex Bank. It is entitled for currency chest facility and also a right to become the member of clearing house. Then we'll move for the non-scheduled banks. Definition of a non-scheduled bank. A non-scheduled bank refers to the banks which are not listed in the second schedule of the Reserve Bank of India Act. At present, there are only 3 such banks in the country. In finer terms, the banks which do not comply with the provisions specified by the central bank. And they are also not able to serve and protect the depositors' interest, and so they are known as non-scheduled banks. We can say that all local area banks are called as non-scheduled banks. When we look into this chart, which is already shown once in the previous session where we learnt about the organization structure of a banking industry. So it is the same thing, that is a Reserve Bank of India is classified into scheduled and unscheduled banks, or we can also call it as non-scheduled banks. And scheduled banks are further divided into various categories like commercial banks and cooperative banks. And commercial banks further divided into public sector banks, regional rural banks and private banks. Private sector banks can further be divided into state bank group and other nationalized groups, while the private sector banks could be divided as Indian or foreign banks. The cooperative banks can further be of 3 categories: state cooperative banks, central cooperative banks and primary credit societies. Now coming to the most important aspect, differentiation between scheduled and non-scheduled banks. Bank implies the financial institution that takes public deposits and extends credit to those who need it. They are a substantial part of the financial system which assists in the overall economic development. These are broadly classified as scheduled and non scheduled banks in India, regulated under the Banking Regulation Act of 1949. The scheduled banks include all the commercial banks like nationalized banks, foreign banks, development banks, cooperative and regional rural banks. On the other end, the non scheduled banks are the banks that do not adhere to the norms prescribed by the Reserve Bank of India. When we look into the chart of this comparison between scheduled and non-scheduled banks, we have the factors on the basis of which we can compare these two banks. Firstly, when we speak about the meaning, a scheduled bank means the banking corporation whose minimum paid up capital is 5 lakh and does not harm the interest of the depositor. And also, scheduled bank is the one which is been included as per the Reserve Bank of India Act, whereas the non-scheduled banks are the banks which do not comply with the rules specified by the Reserve Bank of India, or we can say that these banks do not come under the category of scheduled banks. The second factor is second schedule. All scheduled banks are listed in the second schedule, whereas the non-scheduled banks are not listed in the second schedule of RBI Act. Then the next factor of difference is cash reserve ratio. Scheduled banks are required to maintain a cash reserve ratio with Reserve Bank of India, while non-scheduled banks need not maintain any cash reserve ratio with the RBI. The next factor of difference is borrowings. Scheduled banks are allowed to borrow money from RBI for regular banking purposes, whereas the non-scheduled banks are not allowed to borrow money from RBI for any of their regular banking purposes. Then the next factor of difference is returns. Scheduled banks are required to submit returns on periodic basis, whereas the non-scheduled banks need not provide any such provisions of periodic returns. Then the last factor of difference is members of clearing house. Scheduled banks can become a member of clearing house, while the non-scheduled banks cannot become member of clearing house. So these points are very simple, wherein we can easily differentiate between the scheduled and non-scheduled banks. Hope this session was useful to all of you. Thank you so much. Take care till we meet in the next session.